The world is so unpredictable. Everything happens out of the blue. We like to think we're in control of our own existence. In some ways we do, and in some ways we don't. But mostly, our lives are influenced by random coincidences. Paul Austen. My name is Salvatore Benedetti. My friends call me Sal. I travel quite often on business, averaging about 10 days a month. That's fine with me. I'm single, no kids, and I make pretty good money. I've already developed the habits of a seasoned traveler. Over time, I've learned to be pretty tolerant of people going on vacation and having to deal with them at airports. I always travel light and never give up my bag during a flight. For hotel service, I have very high expectations. If they make a mistake in booking rooms or have rude staff, I move out immediately. So there I stand, mad as hell, in the parking lot of the Marriott Hotel in downtown Chicago at 3:30 in the morning, wearing only shorts and a t-shirt that serve as my regular pajamas for the night. The fire alarm woke me from a dead sleep, and since my room was on the 12th floor, walking down the fire escape to the bottom turned out to be quite a long walk. Fortunately, it's June, and the early morning air isn't too chilly. I'm wearing a low-hanging baseball cap, just to let the other hotel guests know that I'm not interested in discussing the cause of the alarm. As I stand off to the side, my attention is drawn to one face. It's a woman, about my age, tall and with a gorgeous figure, her hair gathered back in a ponytail. She stands leaning against an equally tall guy. He's well built too, holding her in a warm embrace and whispering something in her ear. Her face is flushed and she giggles like a schoolgirl who has just been told a dirty joke. At one point, she snuggles up and kisses him warmly on the lips, her hand stroking his cheek. They are obviously lovers interrupted by a fire alarm. He's probably saying something to her about how lucky they are that one of the firemen didn't break into the room while they were together. My pulse quickened, and my breathing became intermittent. The guy looked vaguely familiar, but there was no way I could remember him. But I knew that tomorrow morning, I would remember who he was. I knew the woman pretty well. I had dinner with her and her husband 5 days ago. Her name is Lily Wellston, and she's the wife of my best childhood friend, Tim Wellston Sr. I was godfather to Tim, Jr., one of their 2 children. Let me explain. Tim and I grew up 5 blocks apart and went to elementary school together. Those 5 blocks separating our homes might as well have been on opposite ends of the planet, so different were they. Tim lived on the outskirts of a decent blue-collar neighborhood in Lexington, Kentucky. His father, Big Ed, was a police officer, and his mother, Tina, was a high school math teacher. The 2 of them made decent money, had a modest but cozy home, and were able to provide for their 4 children, of whom Tim was the youngest. If you walked 3 blocks east of Tim's house, crossed the railroad tracks, turned left, and walked 2 more blocks, you would be in a different world, in my neighborhood. I never knew my philandering father, and my mom worked 2 jobs to have a roof over her head. I had an older brother, Mike, who was also trying to help make some money when he got older. Between night shifts on the cleaning crew at Good Samaritan Hospital and working behind the counter at the local diner, my mom somehow managed to make ends meet. Tim and I became friends in 6th grade. I was walking home after school one day when I saw 4 8th graders surrounding Tim, and it was clear he was about to get smacked. My older brother Mike taught me how to stand up for myself and never back down in the face of those who bully you. His advice was simple. If a fight can't be avoided, hit first and hit hard. Never run away from anyone, and even if you get beaten up, you will still be respected afterward. It was immediately clear that 1 against 4 was a bad matchup for Tim. Since I was already experienced in fighting, I swooped down on them from behind, knocking a few of them down. Grabbing by the scruff of the neck, the one who was the healthiest of them, a guy named Wayne Parker, I punched him right in the jaw with all my might. That knocked him out, and he fell to the ground. "What's going on here?" I shouted, looking at the other 3. I'd always had a keen sense of justice, and I was pissed off that 4 men had pounced on one. One of the guys, Tony Simmons, replied, "Wayne told Tim to give him his pocket money in a nice way, and Tim said no." So Wayne decided to teach him a lesson. I began to boil with anger. "Tim, is this true?" He looked at me with a bloody nose and said, "Yes, and there's no way Wayne is getting my money." Life on the other side of the railroad tracks teaches a man to make quick decisions. And even though those decisions weren't always perfect, inaction is a sure path to disaster. After quickly figuring out what was involved, I laid out my solution to their problem. I glared angrily at the three men who were with Wayne. "You three, get out of here! If any of you try to interfere and help Wayne, I'll kick your asses. And if you manage to kick my ass, you're going to have to deal with my brother Mike. Do you understand?" Mike was a tough nut to crack. Even the local gangsters stayed away from him. When he was 14, a small-time drug dealer tried to get him to sell drugs. Mike refused, so the asshole decided to show Mike who was boss. Eventually, when they got separated, it turned out that the drug dealer was missing 4 teeth, had 2 broken ribs, and would never be able to see clearly out of his right eye again. The cops were going to arrest Mike for assault, but James Aubrey worked things out with them and they let Mike go. At the time, James was the toughest crime boss in our neighborhood, and maybe in all of North Lexington. No one ever messed with Mike again, and he became good friends with Aubrey. 4 years later, Mike enlisted in the Marine Corps. He spent 8 years rising to the rank of staff sergeant before quitting, returning home, and joining the LAPD. Now he works as a homicide detective in the Major Crimes Unit, and to this day, there's no one who would dare cross him. But, back to the other day. I highly doubted my brother would get involved if I got my ass kicked by 3 teenagers who were only 2 years older than me. But they didn't know that, so they all nodded in agreement. "So, Wayne, now you're one-on-one with Tim. If you think you can kick his ass, go ahead, but if he kicks your ass, you leave him alone forever." A wicked grin flashed across Wayne's dumbfounded face. Apparently, he thought he could handle Tim without a problem. "Sure, Sal. That's fine with me." Long story short, the fight ended in a draw. Parker was taller than Tim by a head and at least 10 pounds heavier, but he underestimated his opponent. Tim wasn't a very good fighter, but one thing was certain. You'd have to kill him to make him surrender. Tim definitely got the better of him, but he didn't give up, landing 2 or 3 good punches in return. Eventually, it came to Wayne's attention that this was a futile endeavor, and he just turned around and walked away. Tim's money stayed with him, and no one ever tried to take it from him again. When we drove home together, our friendship only grew stronger. "Why'd you do it? You didn't have to stick up for me." "I don't know. I guess I just hate people like Wayne." "Anyway, thanks." "Yeah, no problem, kid. I wasn't going to fight them for you. I just wanted to make sure you at least had a chance." "Yeah, it would have hurt me a lot if you'd gone into the fight instead of me, but thanks for leveling the playing field." From that day on, we were Sal and Kid. His parents liked me when they got to know me better, and Mike respected Kid when I told them about his fight with Weenie. Mike was graduating from high school at the time, and he decided that with a character like that, Kid should definitely learn to box. Mike worked him up a sweat 3 nights a week, and Kid learned fast. By the time Mike left to join the Marines, even I didn't like getting in the ring with my best friend. We did all the usual teenage bullshit together. Girls, beer, sports, and sometimes a little weed when we could get it. Kid was a well-read nerd, and I had an easygoing personality that helped us meet girls. Just to be clear, neither of us ever hooked up until after high school, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Kid went to college and got a degree in business. I went to 2 years of college and got an associate's degree in something called interdisciplinary studies. I'm pretty sure that meant knows everything but can't do shit. Kid met and fell in love with Lil in college. I remained single but was best man at his wedding, 2 years after graduating from college. He went to work at a local bank and I started my own landscaping business. We both did well, and 3 years later I became godfather to Tim, Jr. 2 years after that, Lil gave birth to Mary, about the same time Kid started climbing the ladder in the world of finance. 3 years later, my small business was on the upswing when Kid came to visit me one afternoon. We talked for a couple hours, and the gist of our conversation was that Kid wanted to bring some investors into my business so that I could expand. He explained everything to me very lucidly, and I ended up getting a check for $200,000 in just under a month, which allowed me to double my equipment and crews right away. I became a serious player in the landscaping world in central Kentucky, eventually opening businesses in Louisville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Nashville. I also started occasionally representing John Deere, so I began to be on the road more often. And now, I'm standing in the parking lot of a Chicago hotel at 1:30 at night, and I feel like my world is falling apart. I loved Lil as my own sister, and it would never have occurred to me that she was capable of cheating on Kid. They had been married for about 12 years now, and everything seemed to be great. Sure, they fought from time to time, like any married couple, but Kid was a model husband and father. And despite the fact that he worked hard, he never missed an anniversary, a birthday, or a family holiday. Periodically, he would take Lil away somewhere for the whole weekend so that their romance wouldn't falter from the mundane, everyday life. It always seemed to me that she adored her husband, so there was no reason to believe there was anything wrong between them. Taking a few deep breaths, I tried to focus on what I was about to do. Lil hadn't noticed me yet, but that could change at any second. I quickly pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, then switched to video and spent a couple minutes recording what was happening. I had enough evidence that these two were more than just friends. The video clearly showed him pulling her against him for a long kiss while stroking her ass. I don't know how I restrained myself from smashing his face right there in the parking lot. It was a good thing that at that moment, the stand-down signal was given and the guests started heading back to the hotel. I waited for a while and watched them enter the elevator along with about 6 other people. Their stall stopped on the 8th, 9th, and 14th floors. Although this information was not enough, I nevertheless decided that at this point there was nothing more for me to do but go back to my room. I continued to toss and turn until 6 in the morning, after which I went for a long jog to release my anger and frustration. Later that morning, I saw the asshole again. There was still no way I could remember his name, but I knew it was only a matter of time. He was standing at the front desk when I slipped into the line behind him to hear what it was all about. "Yes, Dr. Porter. What can I do for you?" "I have some business meetings to run, so I'll be gone all day, but my wife is staying here. Could you call her room in about an hour and let her know she's booked a full spa treatment for the day?" "Oh, absolutely, sir. So Mrs. Porter, room 1419, a full spa treatment from her loving husband." I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was overjoyed. "Yes, that's right," he replied with a smirk. "That's right, from her loving husband." I turned and walked away quickly before he could see me. He probably wouldn't have recognized me anyway, unless he had a photographic memory. We had been glimpsed meeting this Dr. Mudak Porter once at a social event at Kids about 2 years ago. He worked as a surgeon at a local clinic and was on the community council with Lil. The community council was concerned with scholarships for children in our town who lived below the poverty line. But apparently these two's responsibilities also included sex, behind my friend's back. The reason I came to Chicago was for a landscaping equipment show. But that didn't matter now. I was still confused and couldn't decide what I should do, so I did what I always did when I was totally confused. I called my older brother. After a 30-minute conversation, I was beginning to have a concrete plan of action. 2 hours later, and $200 poorer, I slipped into Dr. and Mrs. Porter's room. Thanks to the fact that one of the housekeeping staff had absolutely no reason to doubt that I was the guest in room 1419, who had lost his keycard due to absent-mindedness. After talking to Mike, I was determined to stay out of this fight instead of Kid. But if I could pull off what Mike had suggested, I'd be damn sure Kid would at least have an equal chance, just like when I was a kid. 2 days later, I pulled into the garage of my house and got to work organizing the information I had just received. In the evening, Mike came over for a beer and to make sure I hadn't screwed up by taking his advice. He made a few adjustments, but generally gave his okay to my plan. The next morning, I called Kid. "Sal, man, how'd it go in Chicago?" "It's all right, Kid. How's your family doing?" "Everything's great, but the kids are asking when Uncle Sully's coming. Lil, she just got back from New York. She went to visit her sister. So how about we come over this Friday for steaks and beer and all sit down together? You said Lil was in New York, right? And how's Connie doing?" "She seems fine. Lily was a little tired when she got home. She said Connie wore her out a lot, but she had a great time." "Yeah, I bet she did," I thought. "Sure, Kid, we're all set for Friday." Friday night came and I put on an Oscar-worthy performance. Lil and I kissed on the cheek when I arrived, and I had real fun playing with my godson and Mary. Later, when the kids had already gone to bed, Lil, Kid, and I sat on the back patio and drank beer. So, Sal, how was the Chicago Expo? Kid asked. I glanced at Lil and saw her flinch slightly. Being too caught up in her affair, she'd obviously forgotten where I was supposed to be last week. All in all, not bad, kid. Checked out some new equipment I'll probably buy, made some useful new acquaintances, and had a good time except for Tuesday night. What happened? I watched Lil out of the corner of my eye as I told her what happened. The damn hotel fire alarm went off at 3:30 in the morning. My room was on the 12th floor, and I had to drag my ass down 12 flights of stairs and then stand in the parking lot for half an hour because it was a false alarm. Lil looked a little pale and fidgeted nervously, looking down at the floor, but Kid wasn't paying attention. Yeah, it sucks, dude, but that night run had to be good for you. Kid grinned. It sure did. Good thing I wasn't staying in the penthouse on 14th, so I saved myself a couple flights of stairs. So how's Connie doing, Lil? Kid tells me you had a great few days with her in New York. I gotta hand it to her. For a cheating whore, she held her own and kept her composure. We had a nice time with her, as always, Sal. Oh, and she asked if you'd changed your position on bachelorhood. Well, hell no, Lil, you know me. Marriage and parenthood, it's not for me. I'm a confirmed bachelor, and I plan on staying that way. Marriage can hurt too much. Look what happened to my mom. Married a guy who cheated on her repeatedly and then left her with me and Mike. There's no way in hell I'm going to stand for that kind of betrayal. Damn it, Sal, Kid replied. You're too pessimistic. Who knows? Maybe somewhere out there, there's a wonderful woman you could have a terrific marriage with. Just look at us. My heart was ready to burst into pieces, but I kept my composure. Yeah, I said, looking at them both. There might be a woman like that, but I'm not ready to take that risk yet. I have a best friend. I can play with his kids when I get the itch of fatherhood, and I'm not risking anything. Do you agree with me, Lil? I looked her straight in the eye. She seemed to realize at that moment that I knew about her second life, but the lying slut didn't even blink an eye. I think marriage is a beautiful thing, even though it is hard and has its ups and downs. A complete family gives children the opportunity to grow up in a safe and loving environment. Even if there are resentments or disagreements, two loving people will still stay together through the hardships, and that's what matters most. Lil, in no uncertain terms, just made it clear that I had better keep my mouth shut to avoid hurting my friend and his children despite her disgusting act. But I didn't back down. No matter what, Lil? Yes, Sal, no matter what. With those words, she stood up, yawned, and stretched. Well, I'm off to bed. Don't stay up too late, Tim. See you later, Sal. Always nice to have you in the house. What a bloody hypocritical bitch. Seems like the only thing that upset her was that she got caught. She didn't seem to care at all about the fact that she'd cheated on her or that she'd neglected her husband, who was easily one of the best on the planet. I barely managed to keep my composure enough to drink another beer and then go home. All the way home, I pondered how Lil had reacted to my words. I wondered if I could let her manipulate my attitude toward Kid and the kids and become complicit in all the disgusting lies and betrayal. Should I really keep quiet about her affair for the sake of their family's well-being, and even though that whore would continue to spread her legs for Dr. Asshole? I replayed it over and over in my head as I drove home, and by the time I pulled into the driveway, I already knew the only right answer. Hell no. 2 days later, I sprang into action. First thing Monday, I made an appointment with an asshole surgeon for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of my crews was landscaping the medical clinic where he worked, and, as it turned out, the building belonged to Porter. Since it had been a long time since I had contracted for work, there was little risk that Porter would guess who I was before we met. I told his secretary that I had additional agreements to previous contracts that Dr. Porter needed to sign so that our cooperation would not be interrupted. It would literally take 10 minutes. She promised to squeeze me into the schedule. Then I texted the lying whore. Meet me at 10 a.m. at Common Ground Coffee Shop on East High Street. A minute later, she replied, Sorry, I have a couple appointments, so I won't be able to make it. I smiled. Okay, that's okay. Then I'll just send Kid a picture or two that I took in the parking lot of the Chicago Marriott Hotel last Tuesday at 3:30 in the morning. In those pictures, Dr. and Mrs. Porter look very cute together. The reply came immediately. You're bluffing, damn it! Well, let's put it to the test, bitch. If you're not here at 10:01, I'll send him the pictures, and then I'll go to his fucking office and show him the tape of you and your doctor asshole having each other Wednesday night at the same Marriott. I really hope you don't show up after all, you lying whore. I don't believe you. You don't have a damn thing. A moment later, hey, skank, open the attachment. The fucking clock is ticking. Don't be a minute late or I'll burn your world to the ground. Bastard. I'll be there, but I'll make sure that from now on you disappear completely from Tim and I's life. You will never be seen again, not by your godson, not by Mary. And I chose common ground because it was far enough away from Tim's office. My intention was to give that slut Lil a chance to come clean and show some remorse, and I didn't want our conversation to be interrupted. I arrived about 20 minutes early, got a cup of black coffee, and found a table at the back of the room. Lil walked in at 9:58, and I thought to myself, well, it turns out that sluts can be trained. She walked straight to the table and lowered herself into a chair, looking at me with eyes full of anger. I see you didn't even bother to get me a latte. Order your own if you're so thirsty. I assume Dr. Porter left money on your nightstand after you served him. She looked so furious that for a second I thought she was going to throw herself across the table at me. Honestly, I would have loved to punch the bitch in the face, but she stopped, and then she just kind of slumped over. I never meant to hurt Tim or hurt our children, she said without looking up. That's a pretty weird way to take care of your family, Lil. What's gotten into you anyway? I don't know. It started out as a simple flirtation after board meetings, and eventually one thing led to another. One night, we ended up in bed at his house when his wife was out of town, and Tim had taken the kids to visit his parents that day, and I was on my own. I was so excited about it. I was able to let go of all my responsibilities as a wife and mother for one night, and I thought that was really great. But I never thought it would take this long. I just can't find a way to make it stop. Well, Lil, I can honestly say you shocked me. I never thought you'd lie and cheat on my best friend. I would have bet the mortgage on my house that it would never happen. When I saw you two in the parking lot of the Marriott, I almost fainted. I thought I was seeing things, but to my deep regret, I was not. You realize that by your actions, you could completely destroy one of the best people I know. Please, Sal, don't. There has to be some other way. I can't confess. It would break him. Can't we find a compromise? I promise I'll break up with Porter immediately. You keep the photos and video. It'll be collateral, guaranteeing you that I'll do exactly what I say. I'll never stumble again, and if Tim doesn't find out, our family will be intact and our kids will be fine. It's too late, Lil. You can't undo what you've done. You should have thought about the consequences of living a double life the first time you decided to sleep with Porter for nothing. What you do with Porter now is up to you, but I'm not going to let my best friend be made a laughingstock or bullshitted. And I'm certainly not going to stand by and watch you ruin his life just because you screwed up and don't want to take responsibility for your actions. But Lil didn't seem like she was going to give up so easily and decided to go on the offensive herself. No, you won't do it, Sal. You will not put Tim in a situation where he loses his wife, most of his money, his children, and the life he has and cherishes. Don't back me into a corner. You realize there's no such thing as an amicable divorce. I'm going to beat the hell out of him, and when he asks me why I'm doing this, believe me, I'm going to make sure he knows you started it. So maybe it's best to listen to reason and take it easy. Help me out of this situation so I can save my marriage and my family without hurting anyone, or else it's going to end very badly for him, and that's when he's going to hate you. I just shook my head and grinned. Do you think that's funny, Sal? Understand, I'm going to drag you down with me if you don't back down. I stopped smiling and gave Lil a cold, murderous stare that made her pale. Look, Lil, the art of bluffing is to have good cards in your hand from time to time. You just opened yours, and it's clear to both of us that you have nothing. Are empty threats the best you can do, you stupid, brainless bitch? And you know what, Lil? Part of me sincerely hopes you'll take a chance and carry out your threats. I realize that Kid will be devastated by what you've done, and will be even more devastated if you actually try to rip him off in the divorce. But trust me, it won't break him completely. I know him. He'll find the strength to stand strong, and I'll help him through it all. Yes, it's going to hurt like hell, But if he knows the truth is on his side, he'll never let up and stop fighting you, and you'll see he'll win in the end. His name has a high reputation here. He's respected in this town because he's done his best for a lot of people, and they know it. What do you have, Lil? A desire for revenge and a hysterical mob of divorced idiots like you? Well, good luck trying to get people on your side when they see pictures and videos of you and your lover. And you don't doubt for a second that I won't send them out to everyone who knows you in your social circle and beyond. Your parents and your entire family will see Dr. Porter having you from behind. They will hear you moaning and whimpering. Think about how they will feel when they hear you scream. I guess that will be enough for them to realize what a lying slut you've become. At first, Lil pretended she wasn't the least bit embarrassed by this, but she seemed to have already realized she was defeated and decided to change tactics. She made a weak attempt at a smile and whispered, "Is there nothing I can do to change your mind, Sal? I mean absolutely anything you want." I felt her foot begin to stroke one of my legs under the table. Reaching down, I pushed her off me with force. "The slut's last trump card, eh, Lil? You're willing to spread your legs even in front of your husband's best friend just so you can escape the consequences of your infidelity. But the thing is, I wouldn't touch you if you were the last woman on earth, Lil. You have no idea how much I hate you. When you kissed me on the cheek Friday night when I arrived, I could barely keep from throwing up. That's how much you disgust me." Lil seemed completely speechless. She was still looking at me defiantly, but she knew she'd lost. "So, what now, Sal, the holier-than-thou?" she hissed. "Now you're going to go home, call your husband, and ask him to come over while the kids are still in school. Then you'll tell him in detail everything you've done. It will certainly come as a shock to him, but at least he will have 3 or 4 hours to gather his thoughts before the kids come home. It'll give him a chance to react properly to what you've said. I won't get involved in anything, but I sure as hell need to make sure he makes his decision based on all the truthfully stated facts on your part." To tell you the truth, I don't know what that decision will be, Lil. He's a much better man than I am, and maybe he can find a way to forgive you and you can move on as a family. Or maybe he'll just kick you out of his life like you deserve, or maybe he'll find something in between. But either way, it will be his choice, and I'm sure that choice will be an impartial one that will not be influenced. Not by lies, not by deceit, and not by hate. Getting up to leave, I finished, "You'll do it, Lil, you'll do exactly as I said. Or I swear by all the saints that tonight he'll find out everything from me. And if you force me to intervene, believe me, I will make it my life's goal to destroy you completely. Do you understand me, Lil?" It was only now that tears came to her eyes, though I'm sure it was from feeling sorry for herself, not anyone else. "Yeah, Sal, I get it." "Good!" It was the only thing I could say to her goodbye. I left the cafe, drove about a mile down the street, pulled over to the curb, and sat staring at the same spot for a long time. Words cannot express the pain I felt for my friend over what he was about to face, but I reassured myself that he would not be alone, and it would be a fair fight. At exactly 4 p.m., I was ushered into Dr. Mudak Porter's private office. That arrogant asshole walked in looking like he was doing me the biggest favor by giving me 10 minutes of his precious time. "So, Mr. Benedetti, I'm told that you have some additional agreements that you and I need to sign regarding the landscaping work that your company is doing. Can we do this quickly? I have very little time." I remained silent and quickly looked around the room, not the least bit concerned about his schedule. "Say, Doc, this is a private office, right? I mean, in keeping with patient confidentiality, you don't record what goes on in here, do you?" "That's correct, Mr. Benedetti. Otherwise, it would violate about 10 state and federal patient confidentiality laws. Just what does this have to do with the lawn mowing contract?" "That's good." I stood up, walked around his desk, and with all the force I was capable of, punched him flat. He stretched out on the floor and started moaning loudly, but 2 seconds later I had one hand on his throat and the other on his mouth. It was obvious that Doc and I had grown up on opposite sides of the railroad tracks. I'd been in dozens of fights, many of which I'd won, a few of which I'd lost, but I could certainly take a punch. Which is more than I can say for Dr. Mudak, who apparently got punched in the face for the first time in his life. And I wasn't embarrassed by his height or his physical condition. Are you listening to me, Doc? He nodded affirmatively. Good. Now I'm going to ask you some questions, and if I feel you're lying to me, I'm going to strangle you until you pass out, and then we'll start all over again. Do you understand me? Tears started streaming down his face as he nodded his head. First, be a good boy and tell your assistant that we're going to be here for a while and not to be disturbed. But just do it quietly, and don't make me hurt you again. He started nodding affirmatively again. Okay, I'll let you go now, and you'll do as I told you, and I promise I won't lay a finger on you again. We'll just have a little chat. If you don't, you're going to wish you'd listened to me. Porter did as he was told in a calm voice, and his assistant didn't suspect a thing. So, Doc, do you know Lily Wellston? His eyes widened in surprise. Just say yes or no, that'll be enough. Yes. How do you know her? We work together on the community council. I stood up and leaned on the table. It's formal, but that's not all, is it, Doc? No, it's not everything. I sat down again. And what else is there? She and I are lovers. How long has this been going on, Doc? 8 months. I don't suppose Mrs. Porter knows, do you? Yes, that's right. She doesn't know anything. Well, that'll change soon enough, but we'll get to that later. Tell me, before you and I met today, did you have any intention of ending your extramarital affair with that whore, Lil? I don't think such insults are appropriate, Mr. Benedetti. I instantly jumped out of my chair. Clap! I may have gone a little overboard because it looks like Doc started stargazing this time. Just answer my questions or I'm going to have to do some serious work on you. She's a lying, cheating whore and you're a fucking sack of shit. Now let's get back to my question. So, have you considered stopping seeing her? He moved further away from me. No, sex with her is the best thing I've ever had. It probably would have gone away sooner or later, like other relationships I've had in the past, but she's fucking awesome at sex, and spending time with her is one hell of a pleasure. No exaggeration. Well, I believe you, Doc, although I always thought a degenerate like you who steals other people's wives was incapable of telling the truth. But I guess I was wrong. Now let me tell you what happens next. First, before I leave this office, you will write her a message and tell her that you are resigning from the community council immediately and will never see her again. From now on, there will be no more communication and no more sex between you. You will tell her to never contact you and to stay away from you. That's it. Your affair is over. Do you understand? Yeah, I'll do it. And here's another thing. Just so there's no misunderstanding, if her husband divorces her and your wife divorces you, you're still not going to get within a mile of her. You got that? Yeah. Good. Second, you're going to go home to your wife now and tell her all about your betrayal of her and your marriage. And don't worry, you're not the only one today. Lil's doing the same thing to her husband right now. Just to be clear, I have your wife's contact info, as well as pictures and video of you and Lil sleeping at the Chicago Marriott last week. Sometimes you can witness very interesting things happen in a hotel parking lot when the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night. Anyway, if you don't come clean, I'll send her all the evidence she can use against you in court when she rips you off in the divorce. And lastly, you will accept whatever your wife decides without question. If she forgives you and decides to continue living with you, that's fine with me. But if she files for divorce, you will not contest anything and give her whatever she wants. Is that clear? Yes, that's clear, but after you're gone, why should I honor your terms? Oh, that's an excellent question, Doc. Because if you don't honor my demands, you could have an accident at any moment. Maybe not tomorrow, or even a month from now, but one day, when no one is around and you feel completely safe, anything could happen to you. No one's going to kill you. You won't get off that easy. But I can imagine you'll probably lose the use of both hands. How are you going to operate then? You realize this is the end of your career as a surgeon, not to mention the pain you'll be in for the rest of your life. You and that slut Lil ruined a very good man's life, and I will never forget it. So remember, I'll always be watching you, you piece of shit. You believe me, Doc? I do. Once again, I'll be watching you. And if you ever get involved with anyone's wife again, one of my not-so-nice friends will visit you one night, and after that, broken arms will be the least of your problems. Does that make sense to you too? I do. Good. Now sign the landscaping contract and send a message to Lil. Epilogue. Lil and Porter confessed everything to their spouses exactly as I told them to. Mrs. Porter immediately filed for divorce, and Doc didn't contest anything. She got 75% of all their assets. By the way, I raised his landscaping rate 50% too. My poor dear friend Kid wasn't himself for a while. The confession of the woman to whom he had given his heart and soul, and who had betrayed him so coldly, had crushed him almost completely. He went out of town for 2 weeks to clear his head and not make any trouble. I spent the second week with him when he called and asked me to meet with him to help sort things out. As I expected, it was very hard on him, but he didn't break. He divorced Lil, and although the kids live with him most of the time, they have joint custody. He's polite to his ex in front of the kids, knowing that someday they'll be old enough to draw their own conclusions. But that's still all ahead of him for now. Lil lives in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Lexington's West Side neighborhood. She works full-time as a secretary at a small insurance firm. For the first time in her life, she had to work for a living. They say she doesn't date, although many guys have heard from somewhere that she's easily available, so they won't give up trying. There was also a rumor that a few bad guys just recently slipped her some ecstasy and kept her running around all night. But I don't know if that's true or not. I also heard that she'd been hoping for a while that Dr. Porter would eventually call her, but that somehow never happened. Kid has yet to meet a decent woman who will restore his faith in his marriage and help him pick up the pieces, but maybe someday it will happen. Lately, he's started smiling more and more often. That's a good sign. As for me, I'm staying single, playing the role of uncle to 2 wonderful children, and making sure that if someone suddenly tries to hit on Kid, I can guarantee with complete confidence that the fight will be a fair one.